everyone. Today we have our another new episode and we will discuss on future of global economy. We have our world famous speaker, Mr. Rob, Mr. David, and Mr. Fred. Mr. Rob, what you want to discuss about the future of global economy?
Well, let's talk a little bit about the present and some of the past. The global economy is a living, highly volatile organization. It's not a static playing field yet. Right now, we have this confluence of opinions that kind of imply that people are surprised it's not static, and it's never been static. And it's changed quite a bit over time. The executives in particular, well, executives and politicians are notoriously bad at anticipating system disruption. We certainly saw that most recently with the COVID pandemic. Well, then again, with the tariffs, very disruptive. Everybody kind of expects the rules to stay the same, and that's just never been the case. And then where we are now is we're on the precipice of probably the biggest change we've ever experienced as a race. I've made references to this being kind of like the dot-com boom, but it's so much more. We've gone through now several years of AI disruption, and we're probably only at about 1% of the disruption that we're going to be seeing over the next several years. How we got here to where the economy is, we look back to the 1900s to 1940s. We learned during that time that protectionist practices are can create a doom loop. The Great Depression was the example, largely triggered by tariffs, and it's problematic. The going down this particular path that we're on does kind of put us into a doom loop, and getting out of that doom loop right now is going to be problematic. As we got into post World War II, we had hyperglobalization, and the goals to lower trade barriers because we needed to manufacture stuff all over the place to address wartime needs and requirements. And we shut everything to the lowest bidder. And then, of course, as we moved to 2008 and 2020, we had the 2008 financial crisis that proved that a highly connected world was problematic. And then, of course, the pandemic in 2020 exposed that fatal vulnerability of just-in-time wasn't working. We advocated just-in-time manufacturing for some time, but when your partnered manufacturing companies are shut down and can't provide those components, you've got issues. And so you had problems in China shutting down manufacturing in the U.S. And so that kind of showcased kind of the history of how we got to where we are today, where we really didn't anticipate the problems well. We had a number of crises. We're in one right now, and over the next couple of decades, we'll need to dig out. So that's kind of my opening. So I don't go on for the entire column that I just published. I'll pass on to David.
Thank you, Rob. Dr. Sharif, great topic today, and you've really picked a good one here. It's one where we see structural drivers like Rob was kind of talking about. We see AI and technology being a structural driver going across, boosting productivity, reshaping the labor markets, and really creating some economies. But we also see geopolitical and fragmentation. There's a lot of trade tension, a lot of sanctions, a lot of region blocs are pushing the world towards a multi-mode globalization. More regional supply chains, less redundancy, really less efficiency. And in some ways that raises costs, but improves in resiliency. What we see with a lot of the emerging economies is they're stuck with high debt and high borrowing cost. But, that is something that we can begin to address with this. And we're seeing energy transitions going everywhere. And so what's the likely picture as we're going forward on this, Dr. Sharif, is it's going to be a low growth decade. going forward. It's resilient but slower. Inflation rates keep easing, but some economy, uh, like here in the United States, we may live with slightly higher than target inflation for longer than we thought. But what we also see is living standards are divergent. Uh, we've seen that in the past, and I think we know how to handle and put solutions in place, but that's still happening. What are some of the key risks? More conflict, energy and food price spikes, trade rerouting. Uh, we're also seeing places where some of the technology is disappointing. And we know that. We see that that's going to happen across the world some. And we're going to see some of the biggest gains in finance, logistics, manufacturing, software. Uh, and we're going to see advances in driven by quantum, driven by biological computing, uh, driven by QNNs, quantum neural networks, are going to change how we look at things and how we work with them. And those are some of the things that are going to be shaping the global economy, in addition to regulatory. Today over 140 countries are now restricting access to their citizens' data, and that with having it crossing their borders. And you cannot do good AI without good data. So things like that are going to help continue to contribute to where we're headed with this future global economy, Dr. Shree. I guess you, Fred. You're muted.
Yeah. No, I was distracted by my grandson. Question to me is, are we going to keep repeating the mistakes in the past? We're dealing with a capitalist society based on democracy that we've had. People tend to think that Greece was only democracy in the past, when we literally had thousands of countries go through this process. And within the generation, 250, 300 years, the corruption reaches the top levels. So similar to the situation we're in right now. Using AI and automation and quantum ideas to control the currency flow between the trade between nations. It's structured in such a way that we don't repeat those mistakes in the past, don't go off the edge, so to speak, and able to reach across borders to other nations, equalizing the access to the benefits of this technology. We have to share, like you said, all of a sudden nobody wants to share data on their private citizens anymore. And yet that's exactly what our corporate structure is demanding of us. So at what point do we release just enough to be able to do the job without damaging the people in the process? You have to feel, at what part does the capitalism become bad for the people by demanding too much control over their daily lives, as opposed to what we're looking at, we're going to have coming in the next decade or so to be able to deal with these problems and not repeat the same mistakes we made before about them. I see a lot of the pandemic and things that happened in the past being manufactured crisis to bring about instabilities in the markets and for profit and gain on those who would use it for that. We're going to have to crack down on a lot of this that they're letting go by now. The idea that we can report just 6 months at a time instead of quarterly reports. You have to look at who is making the profit off this type of system. I watched some corporate sponsors here in Texas. Behind me, they're about to put in the biggest data center in the state of Texas. But all of a sudden, you get a feeling that this is getting stalled midway through, because the profit agenda for these centers is based on trading on this data about personal information and almost a surveillance state. And if they don't have a market, if they don't have a government buying the data, then their existence is in question. And how are we going to use that to move forward without damaging them? And thank you all today, Dr. Sharif, Rob, David.
Thank you. My next question, what policies and international partnership are needed to ensure that the benefit of economic growth are shared equally between developed and developing countries? Mr. David. Can you unmute yourself, David?
Trying to be a good panelist. You know, you basically look at this and what does it take to make global fair and not just bigger? And that's what you need to do. So you have to look at productivity and productivity capacity. And you need to have industry and innovation policy in both the sides of this one, where you are dealing with the developed and developing countries and need to play there. Distribution inclusion, you know, tax, social protection, labor standards are policies that are going to impact this. But we need to look at what are the global norms on labor, tax, and social. And to help make this really move forward in a way to ensure the benefits, those have to begin to become more normalized in some ways. Finance, you know, we need to look at how to make money available across all of those. Technology, and so the skills, you've got to have training. You have to have that training at all levels, like we've talked about in the past, from the citizens to the companies to the government and to academia. You've got to have a digital infrastructure. You've got to understand technology transfer, open standards, particularly what we're seeing with some of the AI now and the automation and the robotics. And really work on that one there. And one of the keys I personally believe is to have some local R&D in the developing countries as well as the developed countries. So you really need to look at the domestic policies in both of them, because you want inclusive growth by design, not really after the fact where it gets redistributed. And you do this, like I said, through education, through health, through regional development, and labor market policies. There has to be near universal social protection with wages and how to translate the growth in productivity into better living standards, not just higher profits. And you really need to understand how this works in a climate aligned finance. You know, we've talked about climate aligned financing in the past, but what does it do? It helps low and middle income countries invest without creating unsustainable debt. And that unsustainable debt will keep them locked in even generations after we get through the technology spur we're in. You know, I don't know what we're going to do about all these data rules, because there's trade rules you have to do that supports diversity and not lock you in. And I think we still need to come up with a solution of this. You know, one of the hottest topics today is sovereign data, and how do you deal with sovereign data and sovereign compute? And that's just getting us even more restricted when you look at the data governance and how to ensure the developing countries in particular can build their own digital ecosystems, but they benefit from what the other countries have done. So again, real challenge there. And finally, as in so many things, you have to understand the governance, who sits at the table and making decisions. And it's a long-term view of the decisions they have to make, because it's partnerships, it's academia, it's all the things which are rooted in mutual accountability that have to play. And those are really challenges today. So I see Dr. Sharif is really gone. Fred, I guess bouncing it to you.
Well, we're pretty much expanding on the same ideas, trying to find a solution to equality between economies. Somehow I want to believe that having a minimum wage across the board that everybody agrees on is overall policy that could really work. I've seen that almost come to disastrous effect in this country. Saw the other day where what you paid $100 for back in 1900, you now get $4.15 worth. That's how bad inflation has become, because every time you set a bottom limit on wages, well, then the first thing the corporate structure is going to do is try to find a way around that. Stores will, you mentioned wages going up 3 months before they go up. Stores are going to raise their prices. It's cause and effect. That how are we going to stop that? How if your country's basic economy, gross national product, drops the next year or two, are you allowed to drop the wages down too to commensurate for the difference? Or do you end up paying out of pocket for it? You know, communication with open door policy is going to allow you to set these ideas. You would have to set up the organizations between countries that is acknowledged by everybody involved. Trying to get it's like the United Nations, trying to get the entire world to agree on something is going to be the biggest part. But if we can drop localize the effects, find out what this country has, what this city needs, how to balance in between those before we go into the long-term idea of bringing the governance to the entire world economy. You're opening up the door for a lot of bad people as quickly as you do for the good people. And those are going to take advantage of the system any way they can. Is there going to be some kind of accountability, some kind of a world court where these people will be brought to and determine whether or not they crossed the line and what they were doing and who set the line that they crossed in the first place? You mentioned the term sovereignty, and that's a big elephant in the room here. Like, we decided who gets access to this data. Is it automatically the AIs could come in and out? At what point are they going to go around? Rob, what do you think of that? How are you going to keep the AIs from doing an end around on us and finding out this information on their own and using it against us?
Well, that's a problem right now. Containment has been, in fact, I was just on a call yesterday talking about containment and the fact that a lot of the security we're putting around our data and our intellectual property is container based, and these containers are thought to be fairly secure, and that's how we're kind of approaching this idea of malicious AIs. If you happen to capture one, you put it into a container, a sandbox, if you will, and let it operate there. And in theory, it limits its ability to operate more broadly than you've allowed it to. But if that AI is intelligent, it's going to try to escape the container or bypass it. And right now, AI is writing itself, which means its evolutionary path is far quicker than anything we've ever seen before. And if you get though it hasn't appeared yet, if you get a malicious AI that is sufficiently backed up by computational power, it's unlikely there's any container that's going to be able to hold it. It's going to, because no matter how you look at it, it's going to have to pull some types of things out of the container. Could be drivers, could be hardware calls, and any one of those paths could allow it to eventually find a way to breach the container. And of course, if it knows there's a container in there, then it could look for ways to not be containerized, because we don't operate everything in a container these days. And all it's got to do is fool you into thinking it's something that it's not, and suddenly it's running rampant in your company or on your computer. That we are going to be facing, I think, some very severe AI malware outcomes, simply because we do not have the capability right now to develop remedies that can evolve as quickly as the hostile AIs are. It's kind of the problem with defense. With defense, you have to stop every attack. The attacker only has to be successful once.
Right. And Rob, it's not just that, it's also concentration of the data. So it's in containers, but we're concentrating the data so that one breach, you get a lot more now than you used to ever in the past.
It's what made me nervous when they started interconnecting the nuclear plants. Their big defense was they were air gapped, and so it didn't matter if you had malware or whatever. If somebody's going to bring a virus into a nuclear plant, they're going to have to hand carry it and get into the data center physically because they were air gapped. But a couple of administrations ago, they decided to combat malware. They were going to interconnect the data centers, and suddenly that air gap has now been removed, and so that's a serious problem. I mean, the software is fairly secure, but it's secure against 1990s standards, and so the now we've got nuclear plants that are in danger because we tried to fix one malware problem and only opened up a whole series of potential exposures that we didn't have before. Scary stuff. Well,
I ran into something similar to that, Rob, when I was working at the South Texas nuclear plant in 1977 when I was on a labor crew. Just working a shovel, digging sand. But it was nothing impossible to see that somebody could get in and sabotage one of those places at that point in time. And could have easily left something for later on to go off. Even with tight security around all this, just like I said, even with keeping the systems from finding a back door in or out, you can't stop all of it. There's going to be one getting through somewheres, and if enough are launched at you in one attack, you're susceptible.
You're 100% right. I guess, Rob, one of us needs to be the Dr. Sharif right here. His next question was, what role will the innovation ecosystem, startup, venture capital, and talent development play in creating the next trillion-dollar industries? So,
innovation, venture capital, and talent development all go to the core of any advancement. A lot of the focus, of course, is going to be on the application of the various generations of artificial intelligence. We're talking agentic AI at the moment in terms of where we are with regard to the evolution, and hopefully, well, a lot of us are predicting we're going to have AGI before the end of the decade, which is broadly capable. That does kind of mean that as we talk about training up people, in theory, preparing for these outcomes. At the very beginning, we've got to look at how companies are using AI today and pointing out where they're not using it right. So for instance, they should stop using AI to just cut entry-level jobs, because that's a race to the bottom. And the problem is how do you get advanced employees if you cut out all the new employees? So, I mean, you don't get a ramp. You don't get your managers if you get rid of all the people that you're going to train up into management. And you don't get advanced engineers if you don't start with novice engineers and train them up. So getting rid of those entry level positions is nuts, and we're seeing a lot of that right now. you want to shift as a company to generating IP-led solutions as opposed to labor-led solutions, and make sure you protect the IP, because that's the value that you're going to be able to sustain. And as David pointed out, with regard to co-locating data, probably want to decentralize your physical footprint and your data repositories and build in redundancy, a lot of redundancy. I think the last couple of decades have showcased that redundancy is good. With a sufficient amount of redundancy, you can survive most anything. And yet we often don't put in place kind of like an insurance sale. People don't want insurance until they need it, and when they need it, it's too late. It's the same thing with regard to putting in decentralized and redundant systems. People don't want to fund it until they need it, and when they need it, it doesn't matter how much funding you got, you're not going to get there. This has to be done before the problem happens. And of course, with individual employees, the career ladder that we've been promoting for my entire life is pretty much dead. The idea of being able to go to school and being able to milk that knowledge for the rest of your life, that's dead. That's just you're not going to be able to do that. You're just talking about being perennially unemployed. We're entering the era of continuous micro credentialing, and so you're constantly staying up to date and being qualified on the systems you have to work with, the tools that you need to utilize, and the need to maintain a certain amount of currency with regard to those tools and technologies that you're using. And of course, the thing that a lot of people aren't learning yet is the fact that with AI, you have to learn to be able to audit the results. The AI is very fast. It can develop. It can give you pretty much everything you want in a matter of seconds, when otherwise it might take you weeks, even months or years to accomplish the same result. The thing is, it makes mistakes, and those mistakes, you have to be able to pick out the mistakes. The screwy thing is we're not spending as much time as I'd like on spinning up AI as an auditing function, as an error checking function, because I'm not convinced we as people are going to be quick enough to catch the mistakes that AI can generate, given the speed that it's generating those mistakes. And so even though I'm certainly advocating that people spin up their ability to audit, edit, do quality reviews, and the rest, the reality is I don't think that's going to be sustainable long term, simply because the speed in which AI can create problems. It does mean that the skill sets that are being developed by people to do this stuff then can be used as training models for the AIs that are used to validate the results. And as long as there's some kind of a loop that's continuous that allows people to continue to improve the auditing function, I think we can get there. There is one, however, niggling problem that sits in the back of my head, and that's if these auditing programs, which tend to be if they're done right, they tend to be relatively broad and encompassing. If they become compromised, they could become a bigger problem than the systems that they're overseeing. And so the security over these auditing programs, these quality control programs, needs to be absolute. And again, I'm not sure we can get there from where we are at the moment. Because we're trying to get ahead of a problem we're barely acknowledging. And so my concern is, while I can see what needs to be done to mitigate the danger, I'm not seeing the mechanism being developed to do it, and that has me significantly concerned at the moment.
I agree with you so much on that, Rob, is that we're seeing a place where we're still trying to decide the role of the human in QA and managing things. A speech I gave us several months ago in talking about how security is going to go and how it's going to become distributed. Some of the statistics I found online is where AI has the most strength in a breach is the first 90 seconds, where it has to identify there's an attempt, isolate that attempt, and then block it, but then notify humans on what to do. And then it becomes a human AI battle after that. I think that same approach of a distributed future with AI is real important as we go forward, where instead of AI being a lead and humans kind of following up, it becomes a collaborative partnership. And that there's points built in there where a human has to respond and even help make options to where the AI is going to go in the future. And that distributed future, I just think is going to be really, really important going forward as we look at this. And I don't really see many options on it. But on the base part of this question, Rob, where will the next big industry come? It's going to be where science and technology, entrepreneur speed, adequate risk capital, and deep human resources, deep talent pipelines converge into a self-reinforcing ecosystem. Because it's going to take really some of this new developing technologies to develop foundational changes to become a $1 trillion industry. And it's not going to be as just repeating the past. You've got to look at foundational approaches. And I think I see that, for example, with autonomous robots. That's really a new foundational change going forward. And, that's going to be a big industry. I tell you what, I could have sure have used one the last couple of weeks to help me get around and stuff. With that, but I can see that as a foundational approach where that we can build the commercial use cases, but they need to operate at speed today. And what's very interesting to me is they are going to define new business models. We're seeing places. One of my good friends is a developer at a large food services company in Texas. And they were using Claude, but their token price has gone up on Claude, so they're no longer allowed to use Claude. And they built all their development models and everything in Claude, all their AI in Claude, and they're not allowed to use it anymore. So they're having to go over to Gemini now. And the developers are throwing a fit, but it became a cost decision. And we're going to see that happen here too. And it's going to be there. I think the big unknown here is how VCs are going to absorb these extreme uncertainties and how they can build it. But again, we're going to have to increase the human capital, and we have to think of new ways to do that. The old ways of coming in and let's train you in classes and online, I believe have to be supplemented. And particularly since you have a convergence of all these systems coming together, the more discrete training paths we had in the past just don't work. What do you think, Fred?
I think we've come full circle to the original question. How do we adapt our educational system to benefit this?
Right.
If, the biggest drawback right now is we still have a system based on a pre-industrial age mentality where we're just trying to give a general education to everybody. That kind of idea can literally lead to, like you were saying, one system actually pricing itself out of the market, allowing the cheaper systems to come in and take over. But why don't we use those systems in helping with education instead of making classes where everybody just sits around and chair and does rote problems and this and that? We can use a lesser expensive AI system to help locate individual qualities in each student
Right.
and turn that over to the corporate system. Go back to the old job apprentice ideas in the 1700s, where a company would literally take somebody under their wing and train them. That way, they concentrate that training on what that person needs to perform their function of the job and what corporate structure they're in. It would eliminate a lot of waste and potentially bring open increased productivity within the system without having to go outside and do job searches. You train them yourself for what they can do because you know ahead of time what their capabilities are. We use AI to find that out. This way, the information they're gathering is actually useful. You know, you take a system that sit out there and watch how many people go this way, how many people go that way. Put that same system in a classroom and figure out what this student or that person is interested in, what their abilities are, where their talents lie at. Introduce that system almost like a checklist for corporate structure to say, well, let's hand out a scholarship or a program to this person here and teach them how to be this part in this company. You're changing the commitment that the human has to his work. In the past, you can remember in the past when our parents went to work, they worked at one place for their entire life and retired from there. Now it's a case of, well, I'm going to have this job until the next one comes along. They'll lay me off, then I jump back and forth. You end up with 30 or 40 different jobs in a 20-year period. That's a decrease in stability along the entire economic structure.
100%. Fred, I want to say this. I think the change went back longer before you said. I think it goes back to the Algorian marketplace.
Yeah.
Where you had the craftsmen with their teaching other people that, and because you were in a marketplace together, you worked cross specialties. I want to say cross industries, but Algorian marketplace, I don't know if they were industries back then. But I think it goes back to then, and that's why this group intelligence is, I believe, even more important today than it's ever been at any time in the world. Okay, where are we? Sharif has one question left, and it's Rob. It's how should global institutions and national leaders prepare for emerging challenges such as geopolitical tension, digital currencies, cybersecurity, very big one, climate risk, and demographic changes to build a resistant global economy?
Okay, let me start by approaching what I think is coming, and then I'll provide an answer to address that. And by 2030, we're looking at the agentic AI supply chain. That means supply chains will be entirely predictive and self-negotiating, which is going to be really interesting. There'll be severe friction in the labor market as workers shift from execution to orchestration. And this kind of showcases where, by 2030, we really need to have our education system fixed or have supplemental training to allow people to move from that execution orchestration. So they're no longer thinking about doing a job. They're thinking about helping a robot, AI, whatever, to do the job. They're just coordinating and assuring the result. And then by 2035, we'll have a climate mandated economy. There's no way around this. Things are getting worse. So we're talking about carbon accounting and that will mirror financial accounting. It won't be this separate entity. That carbon accounting will be part and parcel to the overall effectiveness of the company, and also will inform where company branches, where the company headquarters is, where branches are, where manufacturing will be. If you can't, for instance, if you can't build a data center because of a lack of water or a lack of power, you can't build a data center because of a lack of water and lack of power. It won't be any more of this stuff like we've done over here near me in Pineville, where they've built a data center, we're dropping into a drought and everybody's got to turn off their water because the data center needs it. That's nuts. The new bottleneck in 2035 will be exactly that. AI requires massive electricity, computational power, and it will have a level of economic dominance over an environment, and it will be predicated by localized green and nuclear energy production. So that all has to be factored in heavily by the time we get to 2035, and then 2040. We're in the post-globalization with hyper-local resilience. We've got 3D printing comes forward. The additive manufacturing becomes a major thing. Transoceanic shipping will undoubtedly decline as countries become much more self-sufficient, as they need to be. And the trade will be largely intellectual property and data, not physical parts. The capability of being able to manufacture in country using robotics will have expanded fairly significantly by that particular point in time. And then we'll be getting towards the end of this particular wave in 2040. And so the kinds of things that nations need to do now to prepare for it is, one, you got to get rid of the tariffs. The tariffs are nuts. Need to focus more on regulatory frameworks that protect IP and encourage AI innovation instead of taxing imports. We're focused in the wrong way. We need to rebuild the grids. Right now, the grids are not capable of handling the loads we're putting on them. Everything from electric cars to these data centers, the grids aren't capable of doing that. They were designed against loads that were based on models that were developed decades ago. And then speaking about models, governments need to learn to work off simulation. If you've got a proposal you bring forward, there should be a requirement to run it through simulation to show the simulated results. When we're talking about governments or companies, they're often way too tactical, and they completely ignore the collateral damage or consequential damages from the decisions that they make. And in many cases, if they'd known the impact of that decision, they wouldn't have made it. Instead, they often look at the quick results and completely ignore the long-term impacts. And that means they need to move to modeling so that their work is critiqued along a strategic timeline, not just a tactical window. And then smart sovereign debt. This idea of borrowing money to create point benefits to consumers is just nuts, because you just burn through that money and then you have nothing to show for it. A lot of the stuff we did during the pandemic was pretty foolish. What we need to be doing is borrowing to fund strategic resilience, broadband, ports, grid modernization, and that sets a foundation for future growth. So if we're going to borrow, countries are going to borrow, it should be borrowed against some future return. I mean, much like banks loan money or institutions loan money, there has to be some kind of a return, and just it's borrowing money to deal with tactical problems rather than borrowing money to deal with strategic imperatives that advance the overall economy has been fundamentally wrong. And so we need to fix this. So going back to how the global leaders need to prepare for this, one, they need to learn the tools of today, start anticipating the tools of tomorrow. So we're no longer living with politicians that think of the internet as a group of pipes. The lack of education for our politicians is becoming problematic, and largely I can argue it's not necessarily their fault. It's just the way things used to be. As I said, we used to go to school, you learn stuff, you never go back to school again, and that education was supposed to handle you forever, unless you were in technology, in which case you ran into problems because you needed to learn things as the tools around you changed. But governments aren't like that. And I should point out, the C-suite in companies aren't like that either. It's very rare that senior executives retrain, and invariably they lose track of the very tools their people need to use. That David pointed out, this switch from Claude to ChatGPT. The Claude has a much higher quality score right now than ChatGPT does, and so a company switching from one to the other is paying a cost that may not initially be monetary, but could be long-term destructive if the quality falls below what customers would tolerate. And strange enough, I ran into this when I was working in IBM in audit, and then again in marketing. Because I would walk in and say, "Hey, we're just." I mean, this was before IBM's collapse. I walked into senior executive management and says, "We're screwing our customers, and I don't understand why." And the response I got was, "You just don't get it, Rob. The IBM, what we sell at IBM is the equivalent of air. People have to pay whatever it is we charge. So go back to your office." As I was leaving, I said, "Yeah, but our buyers aren't stupid. They're gonna figure this out at some point. In which case we're going to be screwed." And IBM almost went out of business for these kinds of policies. And yet these were guys that were well trained, well educated. For the most part, IBM had a university they could have gone to and kept up to date. They just didn't do it. And I did, so I got that training while they did not. And that training pointed to the very problems the company was going to experience that they didn't even see coming. So people need to be educated. They need to understand it. One of the things that concerned me was this last week, President of the United States, Donald Trump, decided he was going to talk to an avatar of Trump. It was Truman, President Truman, who proceeded to tell him everything that he wanted to hear. And clearly the avatar had been compromised. I'm betting it was. I didn't see what engine it was based on, but I'm betting it was Grok. And so if you go back into the historical record, you could find what Truman should have said, or would have said had he been alive. Yet the avatar didn't say that. It just said the part that Trump wanted to hear. And that means, once again, we have a situation where you've got executives asking for a particular answer to a question and then being surprised that it's not the right answer. And this is a big problem with AI right now. AI is designed, in many cases, consumer AI, the chatbot format, designed to make you happy. And people aren't happy when they're told they're wrong. And so the AI will try to give you the answer that you want, even if it's incorrect. And we've had a number of attorneys now get disbarred because they didn't know how to query AI properly, so it would give them the answer they need rather than the answer that they want. And this has been an ongoing problem for executives as long as I've been working. They want a particular answer. They have a tendency to shoot the messenger. And we've been seeing that with the Trump administration for some time now. If he gets a set of statistics that he doesn't like, he just fires the people that are doing the statistics and asks for a different answer. And the new people come in with the same statistics that he doesn't like. He fires them and asks for a new set. And eventually they're going to catch on and say, screw doing accuracy. Just give the guy the answer he wants and we'll keep our jobs, which is just incredibly problematic. So we need to make sure our leaders are trained to understand those risks, understand how to use tools like simulations so that they can actually see the risks of what it is they're doing. Because I'm convinced a lot of people that have gone to jail or lost their certifications or lost their licenses, I clearly wouldn't have made the same decisions had they known those outcomes were in their future. And if we can show them those outcomes are in their future, maybe they make better decisions and thus stay out of trouble themselves.
Welcome back, Dr. Sharif. We are actually answering your last question.
I'm just listening. You just continue, David Smith and Fred, and yeah.
And we're going to look at what are the global tensions and things. And one of the things we've talked about in your earlier programs, Dr. Sharif, is that global tensions, geopolitical tensions, need crisis management, but they also need guardrails. How can we put guardrails around these technologies so that we know when we pass one? And that's part of what Rob's talking about. It's part of what we're seeing in many different places here. Cybersecurity. Cybersecurity is always a cat and mouse game. There's no such thing as a perfectly secure system unless it's isolated, air gap, and not working with anything else. But even then, you have security risks with people coming on site. Climate risk. Yeah. Digital currencies. To me, digital currencies are still a big unknown. Even though we're having them, we're having countries backtrack where they've made decisions, bring new ones in place. And we're going to see that. But, I think the biggest risk we're seeing right now is the global institutions are in a period of unknown now with how to work with each other, how to work across boundaries, how can we de-escalate protocols around things like the sanctions Rob mentioned, trade, critical infrastructure, and how do we look at putting in, what's the right word, geoeconomic coordination. How do we develop frameworks for export control, supply chain security, investment that reduce chaos, but really keep us there? So, we need to work on common standards there. We need to backstop frameworks, particularly those that have to deal with data today with all the new data governance rules. We need to have leaders step up from all the sectors. And, really, we're seeing these demographic shifts. So we have to redesign labor. We have to redesign education again. We keep coming back to that. And, Rob mentioned earlier the fact that the big AI push has pushed all the entry-level people out of positions. Well, you've got to have entry level if you're going to have senior level. And so how can we address that change? And how do we look at how to redesign these structural responses, which need to be redesigned? How do we invest in stress testing, in foresight? And how do we rebalance what we're trying to do? And that's where we are, I think, in the future of the global economy is, Dr. Sharif, is in transition. It's a multi-headed monster that we have to gain and control each head of the monster. So, Fred?
I like Rob. If you paid attention to that AI video with Teddy Roosevelt, he was talking to it like it was a real person. Oh my goodness. We have to take the politicians out of the equation, because the man up there in the big house, whether it be the governor's mansion, whatever, he's not really the person in control. We're just looking at one side of the same coin. That it's the financing, it's the people, it's the money makers, it's the movers and shakers behind that throne that are calling the shots. And the organizational level has to be at their point where they feel their input is, with regard to people, believe it or not, that they can give you a direction of which to take. It's going to have to be made from people behind the scenes where they all sit down at a table and agree amongst themselves whether or not this AI is going to help them or whether that one is going to hurt them across the border, so to speak, where you don't have the people without the education making the decisions. If we see them as being essential to part of the loop, the feedback loop that we're creating a system out of, then you're really changing their role entirely and put them so-called put them back in their place, limit their power, limit what they can do, almost like a combination of our democracy and a royal monarchy where the king's allowed to get out there and say this and that. But the real power is with the parliament and with the people. Once you have their input at the corporate level saying, well, we can change the educational system to adapt to the future. We can change these AI systems to adapt to what our needs are without allowing them to overtake everything we're doing. Just can we drop them back to just an advisory level where they're not making all the rules, where the rules are made by the humans again? Are we going to be able to keep the human in the loop? Yes or no? I see you shaking your head, David. It's almost a monumental task. Are we going to be able to do that to make the future what we want?
Thank you. I want to go for the concluding remarks. first I request Rob, then David Smith, and Fred. Rob, what's your closing remarks for today?
Well, Fred made an interesting comment with regard to where we are with the democracy. And here in the United States, we have a representative democracy where our agents, if you will, go to Washington and are supposed to act on our best interest. And that model has been largely compromised by special interests and large amounts of money that have made the representative democracy non-functional. Now, with artificial intelligence, we could get a lot closer, but to an actual democracy where individuals have a say in every major decision. The issue we've got, though, is are those individuals informed as to how they should vote? In other words, rather than manipulated into how they vote, are they informed so they're making their decisions based on their own best self-interest? And that requires a certain amount of education that currently doesn't exist here. And trusted sources that can provide the information people need rather than the information people want to hear. And so the same problem I mentioned earlier with regard to executives tending to surround themselves with folks that tell them what it is they want to hear rather than giving them the information that they need. We now make that we go from a macro problem or a micro problem to a macro problem if we don't assure that the population is informed enough to make decisions in their own best interest, and they're not that informed at the moment, which is problematic. If we're talking about really creating an environment where companies and countries can survive, say back all the way into the 2040s, that we've got to get around the fact that the economy that we've had pushed complacency, which kind of bit us on the ass these last couple of decades. The companies and countries that will win in the 2040s are ones that are building decentralized footprints, treating AI as a collaborative partner rather than a replacement for people, and that are securing localized clean energy. One, you don't want to really pollute the environment that your people are living in. That's problematic for dying is a problem, and so we're keeping people healthy and addressing both the micro and macro impacts of climate change are of critical importance. And then the next iteration of the global economy won't wait for anybody to catch up. You're going to have to be ahead of the curve all the way. You need to start adopting your infrastructure and upscaling teams now. And this is either national teams or corporate teams to address the future. This is not something you can wait. Things are moving very, very quickly. And if you're not moving to be ahead of the curve, you are undoubtedly behind it. And this next technology wave will bury you. That's it for me today. On to David.
Dr. Shrieff, you always have good topics. My concluding remarks will probably be a little bit shorter. As we kind of looked that the next decade's not going to reward people, institutions, countries that optimize for stability. It's going to be those that reward, that build adaptivity, capacity, technology, and human capital at scale. So to me, Dr. Shrieff and Rob, and Fred, I always go back to this. We're dealing with systems of systems, and this is another place. We have a diversified supply chains, trusted digital and financial infrastructure. We've got to understand the climate, secure data and data sovereignty, and that one's getting really complicated. Cyber and cybersecurity, also complicated. Talent pipelines that can grow, but also develop brand new frontier technologies, but also global institutions that redesign themselves. They redesign themselves for persistent volatility rather than episodic. And I think as what Rob and Fred have talked about, those are the big forces that are going to be there. And those are the ones where we want to see them not as threats, but we want to manage them as these forces that we can shape. And educate ourselves to understand that in the future. So, Dr. Sharif, that's my concluding remark.
I have to agree with both of you. Rob and David, this has been a pleasure, as usual, talking with you all and learning from you. We're looking at trying to escape the volatility of economies in the past that didn't have a proper outlook for the future. In this case, we're talking about re-educating our people and allowing the systems to flourish along lines that are equal to cross borders. Those who don't have can get more from those who do have. Increase our capability of productivity along the lines of using AI to help us, trying to keep it from hurting us. Not much I can add to it. Except that, yeah, we have to educate the kids for tomorrow, and us baby boomers are going to be the ones lead guiding the way for the ones who don't have anybody to tell them how to do it.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. I request all of our audience, please share this content with the government agency, corporation, and academia. Thank you, Mr. Rob. Thank you, Mr. David. And thank you, Mr. Fred, for your continuous support for World Talent Economic Forum. Thank you. Bye-bye and take care.